You should know deals are being made in rooms you will never get access to that affect you directly. A cartel to control the world's compute, to control and surveil everyone on it, and birth a digital overlord. That your tax dollars funded on infrastructure you will never see or benefit from, controlled by a cartel that you never voted for. You're living inside a system they own and rent back to you. This is your money. It will be the control mechanism for the digital prison they will lock you in, and you will own none of it, even though you paid for it, and they will use it to control you. Yes, you. You may think this won't affect you. I guarantee you it will. It's going to affect everyone. They're not building AI or the infrastructure it will run on to benefit society. They're building AI to further enrich themselves and ensure they rule and decide the future, with the ultimate goal that one day it will surveil and replace all of you. Because the biggest lie we are led to believe is that it's all about left versus right. It's good versus evil. And right now, they're winning. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the simulation. You should know deals are being made in rooms you will never get access to that affect you directly. The CEOs get upside and access, but you get AI systems deciding and controlling more of your life. That your tax dollars funded on infrastructure you will never see or benefit from, controlled by a cartel that you never voted for. As more of your life moves onto AI-driven systems, hiring, loans, healthcare, education, content, policing, the more your reality gets shaped by whoever owns the compute grid underneath. If a small block of states and corporations corners the GPU supply, owns the biggest data centres, locks in exclusive energy deals, and writes the export rules, at that point, you're not really living in a free market anymore. You're living inside a system they own and rent back to you. Remember that little WEF slogan? What was it again? You'll own nothing and be happy. It wasn't a prediction. It was a business plan. They just left out the fine print. They own everything, and they'll rent it back to you on their terms. AI and the infrastructure it runs on is part of that plan. It's not a conspiracy if they announce it at a summit and then just do it. You will be watched by models running on their GPUs, your social credit scored by systems trained in their data centers, your online speech moderated by their algorithms. If they decide certain countries, companies, or people are too risky, all they have to do is turn down the compute. Slower service, lower priority, higher prices, less access. No tanks, no coups, just quiet throttling of processing power. When tech gets bought up, it's hard for me not to bring up politics and wealth inequality. Tech has created billionaires who are infiltrating our government en masse. Representatives on both sides have greatly benefited from these tech corporations. Ironically, these same representatives control merger and acquisition approvals, determining just how big these tech companies can get. They're supposed to stop monopolies forming. When these corporations go to build a data center in a new city, in your city, it's our representatives who are doing the private negotiations with billionaires. It's our representatives in every state approving these electricity price increases. And it will be our representatives that approve the bailout when these AI companies can't pay for their debts, because they're now considered a national asset. Meanwhile, our government tells us that there's no money for benefits. Social security is running out. They're reducing the coverage for Medicare. This is your money. We are funding a huge portion of this AI infrastructure that the Compute Cartel will own and make a fortune from in the future. It will be the control mechanism for the digital prison they will lock you in, and you will own none of it. Even though you paid for it, we get none of the profits. We reap none of the benefits. In fact, it will actively hurt you. Not only do you not reap the upside, you also get to watch your job automated away, along with your source of income. Let's play this out with OpenAI, because they're basically the poster child for this. If they convince Washington they're a national asset, too important to lose, in the AI race against China, then when the numbers stop adding up, the government steps in and quietly backstops their debts, just like in 2008 with the banks. Who writes those checks? It won't be Sam Altman, not Microsoft. You, your taxes, your higher interest rates, and your gutted services provide these fallouts. And after all of that, you still don't own a cent of the infrastructure you just rescued. No equity, no dividend, no vote. You don't own the data centers. You don't own the chips. You don't own the models. Not only that, even better for them, the best models that you helped fund never even make it to you. They keep the real frontier models internal. They use them to design and train the next generation even faster, and then sell you a slightly throttled back, rate-limited version as a subscription product. So you end up paying to train the thing, paying to bail it out when it blows up, and then paying a monthly fee to talk to a downgraded version of the model you already funded in the first place. And I can guarantee you the terms of service will stay. They can suspend your account or cut off access whenever they feel like it. Back in mid-November, Donald Trump hosted Mohammed bin Salman at a prestigious dinner at the White House. A few years ago, MBS was basically radioactive. No one wanted anything to do with him. But then the money started moving. Trump does a golf tour and returns securing around $600 billion in Saudi pledges to invest in US companies, defense, tech, infrastructure, AI.
And I want to thank you because you've agreed to invest $600 billion into the United States. And because he's my friend, he might make it $1 trillion, but I'm going to have to work on him. But it's 600, we can count on 600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher, yes, or I don't know, we'll see.
At the same time, MBS is trying to pivot the kingdom off of pure oil. He launches these massive vanity projects. I'm sure you've heard about them. But under the hood, the real bet is on AI and compute, and they will use it to control you. Yes, you. Now let's discuss Humane, Saudi's flagship AI company. Saudi Aramco, the state's oil company, acquired a minority stake in Humane. The idea is to combine Aramco's vast resources, energy, industrial data, petrochemical use cases with Humane's platform. The investment brings not just cash, but also potentially cheap energy and cooling for data centers. This is a crucial factor since powering multiple gigawatts of compute in the desert requires enormous amounts of electricity supply. Humane wants to build one of the largest AI infrastructures on Earth, so it starts quietly cutting deals. AMD signs a $10 billion strategic collaboration. Qualcomm starts working on a custom CPU for their data centers. And Humane promises to put $20 billion back into the US tech and AI infrastructure. Nvidia locks in 35,000 Blackwell GPUs for just one of Saudi's supercomputers out in the desert. This comes only months after sitting at the royal banquet with King Charles and pledging 120,000 of the same GPUs to the UK. So by the time we get to this White House dinner, the outline is already there. Money, weapons, chips and power, all tangled up in a massive web of influence. Trump's dinner at the White House is where they bring all the main characters into the same room and sanctify the marriage. If a handful of states and corporations corner the GPU supply, own the biggest data centers and write the export rules, then your government, your bank and your employer all have to rent compute from them. That's the deeper story of this dinner. There are so many familiar faces. Elon Musk is there. You know, the guy trying to build a rival to OpenAI, who needs absurd amounts of compute, cheap land and power, and politicians willing to look the other way. He'd been publicly feuding with Trump, threatening to form his own party, complaining about government bloat, which there's plenty of. But when there's a chance to plug XAI into a 500 megawatt Saudi supercluster running on Nvidia's best chips, roughly a $25 billion project and one of the largest AI infrastructure deployments on the planet, being spec'd for around 600,000 GPUs, when these kind of numbers are being thrown around, suddenly they're best buddies again. It seems everyone has morals and principles until there's a 500 megawatt data center on the table.
It is indeed my honor to welcome to the White House a great friend and a man of leadership, vision, courage, and strength, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We've gotten to know each other well over the years, and he has become a true partner for peace and prosperity for our countries and for the world and for peace in the Middle East, which was a crowning achievement for both of us. Our countries have been enduring partners, and together this evening, we're making that partnership closer and stronger than ever before, and we have a very different Middle East than we had when I first came into office. As I saw during my wonderful visit to the kingdom in May, on that trip, Saudi Arabia announced that it will invest an incredible $600 billion, and today I said, any way you can up that? And he said, I am going to up that to $1 trillion. So he's investing $1 trillion into the United States. This week, we're also signing exciting agreements on civil nuclear energy, critical minerals, and artificial intelligence. And as we announced in May, Saudi Arabia is also making an enormous commitment to building up its own defense capabilities with the largest arms purchase in history, nearly $142 billion worth of American military equipment and services. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce that we're taking our military cooperation to even greater heights by formally designating Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally. I want to thank the Crown Prince for the role he played in the transformational peace deal that was achieved last month. Our friendship and blessings to America, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and to the world stand out and will always stand out to me. You know, we have an expression, make America great again, and that's what we're doing beyond what anyone even thought possible. So I just want to thank you for being a very big part of it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Jensen Huang from Nvidia is there, Lisa Su from AMD, the tap controllers, supplying the water in a drought. US export rules say you can't send your very best GPUs to China anymore. So those chips need a politically acceptable home. Saudi steps up. We'll buy hundreds of thousands. We'll build the data centres. We'll pay for the power. We'll host your AI gods out in the desert. That night, also in the orbit, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Arvind Krishna, CEO of IBM, Cristiano Amon, CEO of Qualcomm, Greg Brockman, president of OpenAI. If Nvidia and AMD are the tap, these people create the pipelines. Now look at the finance layer. Steven Schwarzman from Blackstone, whose data center arm AirTrunk inked a $3 billion deal with Saudi's Humane AI project. Citigroup's CEO Jane Fraser, Bill Ackman, CEO of Pershing Square Capital, Charles Schwab, an American investor and financial executive. These people turn handshakes into assets, assets into products, products into fees. They decide which AI projects get built at scale and which die as a press release. Then there are the media faces. David Ellison, CEO of Paramount Skydance and son of Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison, the guy who just bought TikTok with massive ties to Israel. The Fox anchors, business hosts and pundits invited inside the room so they can go back on air and call all of this historic and pro-growth instead of the night we sold your AI future to a petrostate. If you watch my previous episodes on the Compute Cartel, you'll notice something familiar. The names. These individuals were all present at the Windsor Royal Banquet hosted by King Charles back in September, when the UK's AI and data centre infrastructure future was locked in and signed for, followed shortly by deals with Microsoft, Nvidia, Nscale, Google, and of course, who could forget the £1.5 billion contracts between Palantir and the UK Department of Defence, which were quickly followed by a digital ID system suddenly ready to go live. Do you see the patterns emerging here? Almost like a global cartel securing their future by controlling the compute power tap and laying the groundwork to control you. Different room, same agenda, same cartel. On top of all that, you've got Trump and the family present. Trump refers to MBS as a good friend. And when you see the two of them interact in private, it seems like they actually are. Trump openly praises his incredible record on human rights and signs off on new defence and nuclear deals with the petrostate. Meanwhile, his own business empire is sniffing around Saudi real estate and projects, Trump Jr. goes off to Davos in the desert to pitch his fund and cozy up to the same circles, then comes home and sits in the same ecosystem as a private citizen. I don't want to call the kettle black, but do you remember how everyone absolutely lost their minds over the Hunter Biden laptop story? Every whisper of a conflict of interest was treated like the end of democracy when it was the Democrats. But when it's Trump and his kids openly orbiting a foreign regime that he's arming, protecting, and upgrading from the Oval Office, for the Republicans, suddenly it's crickets. The outrage machine seems to find a mute button. You've got a sitting president signing off on F-35s and GPU export licenses to a regime his own family is raising money from. And we're meant to believe there's no conflict there? Individually, everyone in that room is already powerful. Put them together under one roof, under one deal. Now you're looking at a cartel. So what's actually got traded here? Well, let's strip it down. First, the weapons. Trump agrees to make Saudi a major non-NATO ally. This is a huge deal, opening the door to some of the most advanced kit in the US arsenal. He signed off on up to 48 F-35 stealth fighters, around 300 American tanks, a strategic defense agreement to lock in cooperation for decades. This one will surely keep Trump favourable in circles with the military-industrial complex, of which for the cameras he has been openly critical of in the past few years. But until now, no Middle Eastern country except Israel had F-35s, due to US policy maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge. So I wonder how Israel feels about Trump and MBS getting close and rubbing shoulders. Then there's the nuclear side. A civil nuclear cooperation pact, access to technology and critical minerals. Because if you want to run a 0.5 gigawatt AI farm in the desert, you need cheap, constant power. They are turning energy into a compute weapon. Pump cheap energy in, rent expensive compute out. Let's look at the deals. Humane announces its Nvidia deal. XAI and Humane talk up their Saudi partnership. AirTrunk and other infrastructure players roll out their data center plans. Saudi and US officials talk about a historic AI and energy partnership. If you lay those press releases side by side, you can literally watch the Lego pieces snap together. Chips, land, power, hardened security, cloud software, capital, military power, all wrapped up in a neat little bow tie. By the end of this decade, if they pull this off, most of the world won't be asking, does Saudi control the oil? They'll be asking how much of the world's AI software runs on their hardware out there in the desert. This is the oil cartel's logic ported into the compute era. OPEC used to decide how much oil flowed and at what price. The compute cartel decides how much high-end compute flows, where it's hosted, who can access it, and on what terms. Now, let's zoom out and look at the economy. They're building all of this AI infrastructure for demand that just doesn't seem to exist. Not yet, at least. At a macro level, businesses aren't taking up AI like we thought they would when projecting forward 12 months ago. However, I think this is harder to track than people admit. I know many employees that will admit they use AI to manage their workload, but perhaps don't admit that to their superiors and management. Also, there are internal leadership and directional misunderstandings around AI and how to use it from higher level management in most companies. As AI does become more competent and less theoretically capable, I assume we will see the widespread corporate economy adopt these technologies at scale. In the micro, however, the biggest corporations are making moves today. They're making decisions and firing employees, shutting down entire departments claiming that they're adopting AI. In saying that, the only real AI revenue is happening within the tech ecosystem itself. They're just financing each other and sharing revenues. It seems as if AI is propping up and inflating the US economy and creating a bubble ready to burst. Let's go back to the White House dinner. Here's the part everyone in that room is incentivized to pretend doesn't exist. Human rights, surveillance, dissent. The man posing for photographs with Trump and Melania and all these CEOs present, who is being toasted as a visionary, is the same guy US intelligence linked to ordering the murder and dismemberment of a journalist, a contributing columnist for the Washington Post. On the 2nd of October 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi dissident journalist, was killed by agents of the Saudi government at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Khashoggi was supposedly ambushed and strangled by a 15-member squad of Saudi operatives. His body was dismembered and disposed of in some way that was never publicly revealed. Outside the White House that night, his widow was there protesting. You didn't hear about her presence in any of the headline articles written about the event afterwards. Inside, CEOs who skipped Davos in the desert in 2018 because it was too controversial are now lining up for photos. For example, Tim Cook and IBM's Krishna had been vocal about ethical AI and values, yet here they were, clinking glasses with a regime known for surveillance and repression, likely negotiating deals to provide tech support and services in that environment. Human rights apparently have a cooling off period. Give it a few years and a few $100 billion in deals, and suddenly everyone's a visionary again. Most of the companies in that room have pages on their websites about AI ethics, responsible innovation, upholding democratic values. The hypocrisy is almost humorous, but every single one of them will go along with the play because their goals are ambitious. A cartel to control the world's compute, to control and surveil everyone on it, and birth a digital overlord. The same stacks they're building to run chatbots also run predictive policing, automated censorship, facial recognition at scale, behaviour tracking, digital identity, social credit scoring, and military applications and targeting. You don't have to be a genius to see how this plays out. When you plug it into an authoritarian-leaning state, which the West is quickly following, also notice who isn't there. China. Not one seat at the table. Saudi's done business with China, bought missiles, bought tech, flirted with Huawei on 5G, but for this AI push, they're leaning west. The Washington's point of view, this is fantastic. Nvidia can't ship top-shelf GPUs to China, but it can ship them to Saudis. Saudi sits in the middle of a kind of swing producer. They used to swing oil supply between East and West. Now they're positioning themselves to swing compute. So while everyone's arguing about which country is winning AI and we must push forward at all costs because we can't fall behind China, well, this dinner is about something else. It's about who controls the pressure release valve. Okay, let's yank this out of geopolitics and drop it back in your life. You may think this won't affect you. I guarantee you it will. It's going to affect everyone. Why should you care that a bunch of billionaires, princes, and politicians had dinner in Washington? Because the deal signed in that room turns into the infrastructure you're going to have to live in. At the end of the day, it's always us taxpayers paying for every financial crisis. Except this one will automate away your job. Because the people truly benefiting from AI aren't ordinary people like you and me. It's these corporations. They're not building AI or the infrastructure it will run on to benefit society. They're building AI to further enrich themselves and ensure they rule and decide the future, with the ultimate goal that one day it will surveil and replace all of you. And they're using our tax dollars to do it. And the billionaire CEOs that sit at the helms of these companies are able to position themselves in the social fabric as rock stars, even though they are probably complete psychopaths, completely removed from the reality that we everyday people live in. They believe they know the answers to everything, and they can't be wrong. Jensen Huang is one that really fits this label lately. In his recent interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, the self-assuredness he spouts as if he can't be wrong, even when most of what he's saying is a twist on truth or a straight-out lie.
And if it has no ego, why would it have the ego to do any harm to us?
Well, I don't assume that it would do harm to us, but the fear would be that we would no longer have control and that we would no longer be the apex species on the planet, that this thing that we created would now be. Is that funny?
No. I just think
Scary.
it's not going to happen.
I know you think it's not going to happen.
Is almost unreal. Yet, when I look at the comments, it's wall-to-wall praise. I'm hoping they were all bots commenting, because otherwise everyone is drinking the Kool-Aid this guy's handing out. This is so dangerous, because when CEOs like this go on shows like Joe Rogan's, they do it to portray themselves as if they're just one of the boys. I've seen this again and again on his podcast, talking with people like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Mark Andreessen, Amjad Masad, Peter Thiel, you know, the Antichrist guy.
This is my very specific question for you, right? Is that
Well, it's-
you're an investor in AI. You're deeply invested in Palantir, in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, in technologies of warfare, and so on, right? And it just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
but-
isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival? But the world of AI is clearly filled with people who, at the very least, seem to have a more utopian, transformative, whatever word you want to call it, view of the technology than you're expressing here, right? And you were mentioned earlier the idea that the modern world used to promise radical life extension and doesn't anymore. It seems very clear to me that a number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh, and either some kind of creation of a successor species or some kind of merger of mind and machine. And do you think that's just all kind of irrelevant fantasy? Or do you think it's just hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
But don't get me wrong, I enjoy Rogan's podcast. I've watched him for nearly a decade, but it's not like he gives them a hostile, uncomfortable interview. He doesn't really touch the controversial stuff they're involved in. And they get to portray themselves as if they're not complete psychopathic egomaniacs, but just some regular guy that's just like you, someone you can trust. But they're not. You can't trust them. When you are worth billions of dollars, you can afford entire PR departments to build your public image. When you're best buds with some media mogul or own social media platforms yourself, or your billionaire friends do, you can create almost any public image of yourself that you want and continue being a succubus in the shadows, continuing to curate everyone's realities. Because the biggest lie we are led to believe is that it's all about left versus right. They do everything imaginable to keep this conflict alive. Stop dividing yourselves. You're being manipulated by the real curators. It's actually up versus down. It's us, the working class, against the billionaires, against the secret societies, against the banking families, against the military-industrial complex, against the Compute Cartel. It's good versus evil. And right now, they're winning. Now, here's the part I don't think people really let sink in. None of this gets built with billionaire money alone. The subsidies, the cheap power deals, the national asset guarantees, the bailouts that are already being whispered about in the background, that's your money, your taxes, your higher power bills. Your government debt that somehow never buys you a hospital bed or a rent cut, but always seems to be there when a mega corporation needs a backstop. Even for the Saudis, this is coming from their public infrastructure fund. You're not just an extra in this story. You're the one picking up the tab. You pay to underwrite the data centres. You pay for the transmission lines. You pay for the export credit gimmicks and the strategic partnerships. And you'll pay again when the bubble pops and they call it too important to fail. And after all that, you don't own the chips. You don't own the models. You don't own the infrastructure. You don't even get cheaper power out of it all. What you get is to be profiled, tracked, policed, and scored by the thing you funded to be built. AI systems you never asked for, running on hardware you paid to subsidise. These systems will decide whether you're low risk, whether you get a job, a loan, a place to live, or a good social credit score. And if the numbers say no, there's no human being to argue with. Just a black box somewhere in a desert that your government calls critical infrastructure. That's the joke they're playing on you. They sell it to you as progress. They tell you your country has to compete in AI. They justify the tax breaks, the power deals, the rubber-stamped exports because we need to stay at the forefront. And the thing they build with that money isn't a public library of intelligence that you get a share or a stake in. It's a privately owned control grid they can rent to your boss, your bank, and your government to keep you in line. So you end up in this insane position where you funded the infrastructure, you'll fund the bailout, and you'll own none of it. And it will be used very calmly and very rationally to squeeze you, to watch you more closely, and to make you easier to switch off. You won't own the AI infrastructure, but it will own you. That's not science fiction. That's just reading the room. So here's the question I want to leave you with. When the bill comes due for all this, when your taxes, your power bill, and your debt have helped build the biggest AI infrastructure the world has ever seen, and that same infrastructure turns around and tells you that you're obsolete, high risk, or not allowed through the next digital checkpoint, how much of this will you still call innovation? And how much of it will you finally recognize for what it always was? You paying them to build your own cage. If you made it this far, thanks for hanging out and watching. If you had fun, learned something, made you curious, or it got you thinking, please like, subscribe, comment down below. I respond to everyone. Stay tuned for the next episode. And until then, stay curious and question everything.